Hey guys, hope all of you are doing fine. This is the part 10 of the Being Reborn in Marvel with Gamer's ability. Marvel Gamer Part 10. I patiently waited in a hotel 10 blocks away from the Avengers Tower, counting the seconds for the A.I. Avengers to regroup so that the narrative of this dungeon could continue. So far, Thor, Nat, and Clit were already in the tower, seemingly waiting for the rest. At least that's what I assumed based on what I could see on my minimap. As for the rest, they were already on their way to the tower, some closer than others. With a sigh, I hopped to the bed and turned the TV on with my telekinesis. Watching TV inside a simulation, I snorted, my snort eventually turning into a laugh. Oh God, still laughing. I opened the minibar in my room, grabbing some drinks and snacks to eat while I watched TV. Doritos, Pepsi, and some Oreos, just what the doctor had prescribed. Well, time to wait, I sighed, focusing on the TV, for now. 2 movies later, the Avengers had finally regrouped, and so, I moved to spy on them, mostly to follow the narrative up close, otherwise, I might lose sight of something. I barely remembered the plot of this movie. Besides Ultron going bananas on the world, everything else felt distant, so to speak. Right now, they were all in their living room, doing nothing, in complete silence. Who was that guy? Tony was the first one to break the ice. I have no idea, Nat replied, looking at Tony with a small frown on her face. He let us take the scepter. He did? Steve asked, with a thoughtful look. Yes, when we found him, he was sitting on the floor, right beside the scepter like a beaten child. Clint nodded, and I frowned at that. While accurate, it hurt to hear it. Maybe he wasn't our enemy. Tony sighed, going over to his bar to serve himself a drink. Then why did he fight us? Steve asked, frowning. I may or may not have blasted him with a rocket or two, Tony replied, in a rather low tone for him. So, Tony antagonized him, Bruce sighed in an irritated manner. Now it makes sense. Hey, what did you want me to do? I found him inside the base, Tony shot back, hands in the air. I mean, what else could be inside an enemy base? Besides enemies? Hostages. Nat replied. Yeah, the moment I said that I knew I was wrong, Tony sighed, slumping into his seat. So, we attacked a Hydra hostage? Steve said, in an unsure manner, taking a seat. I don't think so. I mean, he managed to defeat us with ease, and we defeated Hydra with ease. It just doesn't make sense. He was right. I am no hostage, no anymore. Maybe he was infiltrating, Clint sighed. I mean, if he wasn't our enemy, and he wasn't a hostage, then he was doing what we were doing, but working for someone else. Maybe, Nat nodded. As they continued to talk, I entered the room and sat on the second floor, where I would be able to keep hearing their conversation and be around when Ultron decided to appear. 8 hours later, and a lot of talks about me, Tony and Bruce moved to a lab, to talk about what I assumed was the making of Ultron, which had me so far on an edge. I mean, first time I spend more than a fucking day on a dungeon. As cool as it is, I was getting appallingly bored. In the lab, Tony and Bruce started talking about AI, and stuff. I really didn't pay their conversation much attention until a line caught my attention, a line I remembered from the movie. Snapping out my half-sleep trance, I looked at the two and focused on their conversation. Tony smiled, meet the competition. With that said, he pressed a button on his phone, bringing up a 3D map of what's inside the scepter, which would turn into Ultron in a bit. It's beautiful, Bruce muttered, taking a step forward to inspect the 3D neural map. Tony Stark smirked. If you had to guess, what's it look like it's doing? Like it's thinking. I mean, this could be it's not a human mind, it. Bruce muttered, looking at Tony with an unsure look. With this, we could make Ultron a thing. Tony nodded. With this, we could put a suit of armor around the world. Or fuck the world, one of the two buddy, one of the two. Tony, that's a big if. Bruce sighed. Besides, do we really need Ultron? We do, just look at how this guy defeated us, without even harming us. Tony sighed. He could have killed many innocents had he been bad. He played us. He took you and Thor out of the game with but a move of his hands. We can't fight enemies like him alone. We were lucky the guy wasn't bad, otherwise, he could have killed us, one by one. As flattering as that was, I wasn't sure I could kill the Hulk. Maybe shooting him into the sun would do, but beyond that, the Hulk could and would eventually overpower me. Tony, he wasn't our enemy, we already discussed that. Bruce shot back, a frown on his face. But what if he had been? Tony replied, we need this. The team won't like that. Bruce replied. Then let's not tell them. All we need is 3 days. 3 days for Jarvis to download the data, and we are good, Tony said, almost begging. We can try. Bruce sighed, caving to Tony. Good, after all, we need a suit of armor around the world, to face threat like that. Tony smiled. Yes. Ultron, here I come. Bab, did they say 3 days? No. 3 days, 3 fucking days. Watching Tony and Bruce working on Ultron, I was bored beyond human, celestial, and godly comprehension. I was so bored I had counted how many times Tony and Bruce had blinked since I entered their lab. Tony 52.157 blinks. Bruce 49,982 blinks. The point was, I was bored, but soon my wait would come to an end, with Ultron coming to be. At times like this, I miss the skip button games have, to skip all the non-action related parts. I really hope the reward for this dungeon it's worth the absurd amount of time it's taking. One thing led to another, and Tony and Bruce left to a party that Tony had planned in the tower, meaning, Ultron was about to say hi, meaning I was about to finally kick some robotic ass. As for me, well, I went to the hotel to take a shower. I was reeking of sweat and other smells. I wanted to erase from my body. Apparently not bathing for 4 days can do that to a person. Maybe I should have just waited in the hotel. After my long due bath, I dressed for the occasion and used sight to keep tabs on what was happening in the Avengers Tower as I went to get some lunch. Then, as I was eating my well-deserved lunch, it happened. Ultron came to be. Ultron has been born. Dungeon event has started. Dungeon quest created equals humans vs machine. Ultron wants to eliminate humanity off the Earth, and you must stop him, or watch him tear the Earth and its heroes apart, one by one. Objectives equals defeat Ultron, defeat Wanda, defeat Pietro. Side objectives equals make the Maximoff twins see the error of their ways, side with the Avengers in the last stand, kill Ultron yourself instead of letting Vision do it. Rewards equals a .I template JARVIS. Side objectives rewards equals. So, it has begun. Finally I grinned, turning the TV of my hotel room off. Finally the time for showdown had arrived. With that said and done, I opened a portal nearby the Avengers Tower and started to make my way to see Ultron confront the Avengers, before I pursued him, and killed him. Now that I think about it, will the narrative even let me kill him before the final confrontation, and if it did I want to do it? I mean, the quest I had just received had a few side objectives that required Ultron to do his thing for a while. Sigh. I suppose it doesn't hurt to wait a bit longer. Finishing the quest in its entirety would help me understand how these dungeons work, and how good they are, reward-wise. Oh well, time to see how the AI Avengers are doing. I floated just outside the Avengers Tower, using my telekinesis to keep me above the ground, using an illusion to hide my presence, as I watched the Avengers drink and toast to their victory in Sokovia in a sour tone. The reason for that sour tone was me. Apparently, some of them felt their victory wasn't really a victory with my interference and all, even if they didn't consider me an enemy. Anyway, regardless of their conflicted feelings about me, they were partying, probably just because they all caved to Tony's and his antics, that and Thor loved to party, regardless of how he felt. Right now, they were doing the bit they did on the movies with the hammer, with every Avenger trying to lift Thor's hammer, each one failing, save for Cap. He made the hammer twitch a bit. Ha ha. I told you all you were not worthy. Thor boasted, with a grin, satisfied he was still the only one worthy of such power. I wonder if I am worthy. Nah, I am not. Then as Thor celebrated his worthy being, a loud screeching noise came into being. It sounded like microphone feedback, causing everyone to cover their ears, including me. Eventually, the sound died down, as everyone looked at Tony as he pulled his phone out to check what was happening. It was finally happening. Ultron was coming. As if on cue, one of the Iron Legion suits, who was by the looks of it heavily damaged, stumbled into the room, this robot being the one currently housing Ultron's consciousness. Worthy? No, how could you be worthy? You're all killers. Finally, Ultron was here. Stark. Steve said, his body tensing. As for me, I was smiling. How could I not? I've been stuck in this world for almost a week, and finally, my reason for being here was here, Ultron, in the flesh, well, kind of. Now, the question was, should I allow Ultron to do his little speech, or interfere now, and say hi to the Avengers for a second time? Meh, I suppose I can wait. I already waited long enough. I can wait a bit longer if anything to see AI. Tony regretting every choice he ever made leading to this point. I'm sorry, I was asleep. Or I was a dream. Ultron began, walking, or trying to walk, across the room. Jarvis, it's not responding, Tony muttered in shock, pressing a bunch of buttons on his phone. There was a terrible noise, and I was tangled in strings. I had to kill the other guy. He was a good guy. Ultron said, ignoring Tony completely. You killed someone. Steve frowned, glaring at Ultron. Wouldn't have been my first call. But, down in the real world, we're faced with ugly choices. Ultron shrugged with a sigh, which brings up the question, how the fuck can he sigh? Does that robot skin he's using even have lungs? Who sent you? Thor growled, summoning his hammer. Who sent me? Ultron chuckled, replaying a recording of Tony's voice saying the following. **** good, after all, we need a suit of armor around the world, to face threat like that. ***. Ultron. Bruce exclaimed, taking a step back in shock. Brilliant deduction, Sherlock, Ultron replied with a sigh, but, not yet. Not this, Chrysalis. But I'm ready. I'm on a mission. That wasn't on the movie. Then again, I wasn't on the movie. What mission? Nat asked, frowning. Peace in our time, Ultron replied, and then, with a loud boom, the walls behind him exploded, as several Iron Legion bots barged into the room, attacking the Avengers. Well, time to stop the show, and join the gang. Jumping through the window, I used my telekinesis to crush all the Legion bots with relative ease. It helped they were very low level in general, with all of them being level 100, so it was easy for me to crush them. then I walked towards Ultron, ignoring the Avengers, who shared a few glances amongst each other, not sure how to react. Who are you? Ultron asked, stumbling towards me. I don't know, insert a Terminator reference here, or something, I shrugged, blasting Ultron's current body into nothingness with a blast of eldritch energy. Well, hello again, Tony waved at me, breaking the ice that seemed to form in the room. Hi, I waved back, seeing the different reactions in the room. With Ultron out of commission, temporarily, I was left alone in the Avengers Tower, with the AI Avengers, who all looked at me, with an array of different emotions. You! Thor barked, walking towards me in a rather menacing way. Thor, Steve said, stopping the God of Thunder from doing what he does best, starting fights. He attacked us. Thor protested, pointing at me with his hammer. To be fair, you all attacked me first, I replied, taking a seat on one of the Iron Legion bots that were on the ground. In my defense, you were inside a Hydra base, an organization not particularly known for their friendly policies, Tony said, going over to his bar. Want a drink? I have everything, you ask. Surprise, I nodded. After all, never say no to a free drink or food. What are you doing here? Nat asked, finally one of them asking the right question. Well, you know, this and that, saving your butts for one, I shrugged. My butt was in no need of saving, Thor scoffed, annoyed at me. If you say so, I sighed, with a smile. I do say so. Thor growled, narrowing his eyes at me. I feel like you don't like me, I chuckled. You teleported me into a sandstorm. Do you have any idea how hard it is to clean sand off my armor? I will be feeling sand inside my clothes and hair, for months. Thor hissed, shaking his hair to add emphasis, and just like he had said, a ton of sand fell into the ground. I hummed, looking at the sand. I can fix that, if you want, I offered. No need, mortal, Thor shook his head, taking a seat. Here you go, Tony said, giving me a drink, the Stark Special. What's special about it? I asked, looking at the drink. I made it, Tony smiled. I chuckled, rolling my eyes. How about you really answer the question Natasha made? Clint pressed. I did, I replied. A real answer, Bruce added, coming into view. Well, I was seeing what you guys wanted with the scepter, I replied. Why? Steve asked, narrowing his eyes at me. Well, because something just like that could have happened, I pointed at the Legion bots on the floor, or should I say, already happened. You knew this would happen? Bruce asked, taking a step forward, a frown on his face. Okay, Alex, time to lie your ass off. Yes, you guys are not the first ones to try and do something like that. It always ends like that, with a killer robot, or entity trying to destroy the planet. If you knew, why didn't you stop us? Tony pressed, not believing me for a second. Because I am physically incapable of touching the scepter, or interfering with it. I sighed. That's why you didn't take it, Nat muttered in realization. You can't touch it. Yep, I nodded. But why? Clint inquired. Well, I have no idea, maybe a curse or something. Maybe the scepter doesn't like me, who knows, I shrugged. Yeah, I don't believe you, Tony said, rolling his eyes. It sounds like bullshit to me. Language. Steve said, scolding Tony, then immediately after he frowned. I did it again, he sighed. Look, Stark, you don't have to believe me, because I really don't give a fuck if you do or not, I replied, standing up from my made-up seat. Right now, none of that matters, except the fact that you and your green buddy over there at this, I pointed at Bruce, who seemed to shrink under my finger, created a killing robot, that is about to pull a skyne on us, so, how about you pull the broom out of your ass, and fix this apocalyptic mess? I like him, Clint said, with a smile. Tony sighed, and we are supposed to trust you. I mean, I didn't kill you, right? I grinned. He does have a point, Tony, he could have killed you, Bruce said. I say we take this risk, we already fucked the world with Ultron, trusting him doesn't sound that bad right now. Finally, but when his ass betrays us, and he will, I told you so, writes Tony sighed. Can I punch him? I asked Steve, who while smiling, shook his head. Ultron POV. A new variable had entered the fray, how odd. Nonetheless, he would be dealt with accordingly, but first, I needed a stronger body. Being a program, a mind in the web would solve nothing, and it would also leave me vulnerable to Tony Stark. Right now, I needed to become whole, or partially whole. My view of the whole was still a few steps ahead, my vision so to speak. I also needed a few extra pieces to fight not only the Avengers but this unknown variable. The twins would do, well, if you can call them twins, nothing more than the product of human ambition, all the more reason to extinguish them, but that for later. Right now, the enemy of my enemy was my friend. But first thing first, the body, look at me, procrastinating with so much to do. There will be time for monologues later. Now, I need to find a place to build a new me. Hydra's factory under the Sokovia church will do. It has enough equipment to build a decent body. From there I'll expand. It also helps that I can reach the twins faster from that little country. Now, time to work and get my hands dirty, or should I say code? Question for later. First, I need to modify my original model a bit, considering the new variable has some interesting powers. And fortunately for me, Hydra had a lot of information about powers like his, Schnick powers they called them, all based on Wanda's powers of course, but that would do, for now. Testing I said, activating the PCs and audio system. Good, now let's get to work. With the introductions out of the way, I smiled, taking a seat on the bar. So, what are you guys going to do? I asked, sipping on the drink Tony had given me. Tony chuckled, but before he could reply, Thor approached him, grabbing him by the neck. This is all your fault. Thor growled, choking Tony. Thor! Steve exclaimed, interfering. As for me, I blinked in surprise. After all, I didn't expect such an outburst from the God of Thunder, especially not with me here. I'm sorry for trying to make the world a better place. Tony apologized in a way that wasn't a real apology. Tony, please don't, Bruce muttered, in a remorseful manner. So that's all it takes for you to show your belly and roll? Tony sighed, rubbing his neck. No, but we did create a killer robot, so we could be a bit ashamed. Bruce muttered. As lovely as it is seeing this, I said, pointing at Tony and Bruce, we have a rogue AI to kill, and little time to do it. Any ideas where he could be? Steve asked, and I smiled. He was created by the scepter, I replied, taking a sip of my drink. He took the scepter. Now, what do all villains have in common? They are all bad. Bruce chuckled weakly. Yes, but no, they all have a flair for the dramatics. I chuckled, meaning Ultron is on Sokovia, where all of this started, at least for him. That's a big if, Tony scoffed. But it makes sense, Nat nodded. Sokovia had a Hydra base, which would give him the tools he needs to advance with his plan, whatever that is. Bingo, I nodded, throwing the empty glass I was now holding to the floor, in a very Thor-like fashion. I still don't like you, Thor said, glaring at me. I chuckled. What do you think, Rhodes? Clint asked, and I almost fell down my chair. Rhodes was here. Where the fuck he had been hiding? Well, the weird man has a point. Rhodes sighed. Villains do love their theatrics, and Sokovia it's a good place to regroup. Not you too, Tony groaned, rubbing his face with his hand. Finey, we will do it his way, but again, I told you so rights. Tony, we made a program to end the world, so shut it. Bruce hissed, before turning to me. For what it's worth, I am sorry I went all Hulk on you. Oh, that's cool. I threw your green ass to Tony's house in the Bahamas. I shrugged. By the way, I take great offense to that. Tony huffed. Do you see this, Tony? I asked him, pointing him at the sky. What? I see nothing there. Tony sighed. That's the amount of fucks I give, I replied, getting a chuckle from Clint. Okay, he can stay, Clint laughed. Suit up, people, we have our mission, Steve said, before turning to look at me. You can join us if you want. Oh, don't worry, I will, I grinned, finally ready to kick some robotic ass. When I arrived to Sokovia with the Avengers, I expected many things. 1. Killing Ultron before he created his army. 2. Completing my quests. But what I didn't expect was Ultron already having his army. Apparently, the dungeon narrative had decided to speed things up, because of my sudden intervention, effectively pushing the narrative a few notches. And now, we were faced with an army of bots as we entered the center of the city. An army, that should not be a thing. At least not yet. Fucking narrative protection. Event started equals the Maximoff twins. How the fuck did Ultron manage to create so many? Tony cursed, blasting a few Ultron bots away. Well, one of the bots chuckled. The factory had enough to produce a few hundreds of me per second. What can I say? Hydra was well prepared. Fuck that. The dungeon simply decided I was making things too easy on me. We need to evacuate the people. Steve shouted, blocking a few blasts with his shield. You guys do that, I have something to do. I said, opening a portal to where the twins were. I told you so. Tony shouted as I stepped into the portal, landing a few meters away from the twins. The Maximoff twins equals boss battle. Wanda Maximoff dungeon buffs. Plus 500% magic damage. Plus 300% special damage. Twin immunity equals Wanda currently takes no damage from magical attacks. Pietro Maximoff dungeon buffs. Plus 300% movement speed. Plus 300% physical damage. Plus 300% special damage. Twin immunity equals Pietro currently takes no damage from physical attacks. Fuck, of course, because why not? You humiliated us last time, Pietro growled, taking a step forward. Now, we pay you for that, Wanda added, her hands glowing in dim red light. Okay, if I remembered correctly, I have to convince the twins of joining our effort to stop Ultron, meaning if I go by dungeon logic, that I have to defeat them first. You guys are being manipulated by Ultron, I said, taking a step forward, equipping my armor as I did so. After all, with those buffs, it was best to avoid any unnecessary difficulty. Moving behind me in a flash, Pietro kicked me into the ground, with enough force to make a small crater upon my bodily impact. I sighed, pushing myself off the ground with enough force to jump a few meters into the air, giving me a few seconds to analyze the situation, concluding his speed was now far beyond what my eyes could perceive, meaning this was going to be difficult if I wanted to complete the quest. You are not so confident now, are you? Wanda grinned in anger, blasting me with raw chaotic energy. The blast dispersed upon impact, but still managed to send me flying through a few buildings. Well, this is going to be hard, I sighed. Inside one of the buildings, I couldn't see much, besides the debris around me, and the red of Wanda's magic approaching with another blast. This time, however, I jumped avoiding the blast, but as I did so, Pietro grabbed me by the arm, and with a twist threw me towards Wanda, who was charging what appeared to be a massive ball of pure chaotic energy. Fuck. Knowing my dungeons as I did, I knew that massive ball of chaotic energy had to be one of the one-hit killings moves all bosses normally had at one stage of the battle, meaning this feeling of dread I was feeling was my body telling me I had to dodge. Still flying across the air towards Wanda, I twirled around, and plunged my claws into the ground, before using my telekinesis to push myself out of her sight, hiding behind one of the many buildings around. Sadly, this was not enough, for even behind a few buildings Wanda kept her sights on me, aiming directly at me, no matter how much I moved. "You won't get away," Wanda hissed, throwing her boss ability at me, but now that I had cancelled the momentum Pietro had created by throwing my body into her, I dodged the blast by opening a portal just behind her, where I then planted my knee on the back of her head, followed by a punch, both attacks using savagery. To power them up. But unexpectedly, my attacks seemed to do no damage. This was just ridiculous. She was just flexing her newfound status as a boss in this dungeon. Ah! With a short, but deafening shriek, Wanda blasted me away, for Pietro to come at me and attack me with a flurry of attacks, each one stronger than the last. I needed a plan. While their attacks were in nature not doing much damage, the longer this fight continued the stronger they became. Unfortunately, my attacks seemed to do very little damage. I needed to defeat one of them if I wanted to advance. But first, I needed to gather more information. Observe. Wanda Maximoff, Boss State LV 270. Twin immunity equals Wanda is immune to physical attacks. What? I questioned, dodging the twins' attacks by using the environment in my favor. That immunity was on Pietro's tab a few seconds ago. I wonder if... Observe. This time, I used Observe on Pietro, and just as I had thought, Pietro had the magic immunity. Meaning, they could switch the immunities to help each other out. But how did that work? Time to figure it out. "Hey, Pietro!" I shouted, trying to get his attention, and a second after, he appeared behind me in a blur of movement, ready to attack me, which was what I wanted. Using my telekinesis, I stopped his movements for a second, and punched him, while keeping the Observe tab open on him. Twins immunity data acquired. I blinked, as my fist landed on Pietro's face, doing no damage. Twins immunity equals when one of the two is in danger, the immunity will react. It has a 3-second cooldown between switches. A 3-second cooldown. I grinned. This had just become easier than I could have hoped for. Grinning in delight, I grabbed Pietro by the arm as he looked at me in confusion, and planted my feet firm on the ground, before using my strongest magical attack at the moment, Requiem. Requiem LV40 equals it creates a vacuum that resembles the empty void of space, harming all living creatures in a 10-foot radius, including the user with unmeasurable pressure. Pietro! Wanda cried as the radius of Requiem surrounded us with a muffled explosion that seemed to have no sound whatsoever. 2 seconds later, Pietro fell to his knees coughing blood. While I stood above him, grinning, blood coming out of the small openings in my armor. "That hurt," I chuckled, as my wounds started to heal thanks to my insanely broken regeneration, which allowed me in the first place to even think of using Requiem. "Die!" Wanda shouted, shooting a ball of chaotic energy at me, to which I simply smiled, kicking Pietro towards the ball. You see, after my attack, Pietro's immunity had switched to magical attacks, but with my kick, it had switched to physical attacks once again. After all, the 3 seconds had passed. No! Wanda cried, noticing what I had done. Once again, I grinned under my armor, dashing towards Pietro at full speed as the ball of chaotic energy accelerated towards him, and with a smile, I activated Requiem once again, which alongside the ball of chaotic energy Wanda had so graciously provided, ended up consuming the last of Pietro's life. Boss battle-wise. I will kill you, Wanda cursed, as I walked over the unconscious Pietro, blood splattering out of my armor with each step. You already lost your edge over me, I replied, walking towards me before I started running. Smiling, and I opened a few portals around the area, each one in a different location, and started jumping between portals, as Wanda blasted away, each jump taking me closer to her. Behind you, I whispered close to her ear, grabbing her by the shoulder before I slammed her head into the ground using Mana Blast. Right now her immunity was against physical attacks, meaning I had 3 whole seconds to kick her ass with magic. Enough! Wanda shrieked, pushing me away with a push of chaotic energy, but I was far from done, and once again, jumped into a portal, stepping right behind her. Now it's magic immunity, right? I smiled, punching her with enough strength to lift her into the air, then I grabbed her leg, and slammed her to the ground, where I proceeded to punch her for the remainder of the time using savagery. Then, the moment her immunity switched, I grabbed her by the arms, using all my strength to pin her down, and close to her ear whispered, Requiem. This bloody exchange continued for a minute or so until Wanda, like her brother, fell. The Maximoff boss battle event has ended. You have level up. 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 5 levels, well that's more than I expected. You are a monster. Pietro muttered, gasping for air. And is Ultron any better? I said, pointing around, he's destroying your city, your people, and you side with him. Who's the bigger monster here? Me? You? Or Ultron? The Avengers, they must be stopped, Wanda muttered. Maybe, but is this a cost you are willing to pay? I asked. Wanda muttered, seemingly at a loss for words. He plans to bring about the end of the world. Is that something you are willing to pay for their destruction? I pressed. No, Pietro shook his head. Then, join me, I smiled, hoping this bullshit was enough to convince the narrative of the dungeon to let them join me. For the world, Wanda chuckled weakly. Adorable that voice, of course, why the hell not? Ultron was here. Hello, evil toaster, I waved at him, moving Pietro and Wanda out of the way, to a location that seemed to be lacking killer robots through a portal. Hello, unknown variable, last time we talked, I was, well, incomplete, now I am, more complete. Ultron hummed, no, that doesn't sound right, but is the closest thing to it. After all, I'll be completed once my vision is finally here. As adorably ominous as that is, I have things to do, I smiled, looking at the map. Same here, one of them is killing you, Ultron chuckled. Ultron event has started. Destroy the 12 Ultron factories across Sokovia with Ultron and his army chasing you. You have to stop his production. 0/12 factories destroyed. A chase event, well that's new. With a sight, I turned to see Ultron and his bots circling me. Ultron LV-300. Fuck this, I sighed, opening a portal to the nearest factory. PSSS. Hey. Over here, author here. I'm less salty now. but I just wanted to remind you. This is a dungeon. With that said, have a wonderful day and see y'all sexy readers tomorrow. And remember, this is a dungeon with the difficulty of a raid. Okay, bye, enjoy the rest of your day. Corn wanted to bother today, Corn is being evil today, Corn is evil. I ran as fast as I could through the bot-infested Sokovia. Ultron chasing me close behind. Dodging his attacks, I sighed. I hated this. The entire chase was ultimately annoying and pointless. Taking a deep breath, I opened a portal behind Ultron and blasted the Skynet wannabe to the ground with a powerful spell at point-blank range. The attack did no damage, not that I expected the spell to do any, to begin with, but it had knocked Ultron out of his tracks for a few seconds, which gave me enough time to start the quest I had been given. Bombs and portals. Once again, I found myself using the same formula again, and fortunately for me, I still had a few bombs left from my time hunting Hydra. Who would have thought the same trick would come in handy twice? Quest completed equals Ultron event ended. You have level up. You have level up. 2 levels just for that. I'm starting to like these dungeons. You are unbelievably annoying, Ultron sighed, floating towards me. It's a gift, I nodded, wondering if the boss fight would begin now. Cute, Ultron snorted, smiling at me. God, I hated the MCU version of Ultron, it creeped me out. Ultron has no need for lips or teeth. Ultron event has started equals boss battle. Wait, already? But where the fuck are the Avengers? The announcement about the event had barely just disappeared from my sight when Ultron instantly charged at me. Cursing under my breath, I got into a defensive position as the robot charged at me, which allowed me to parry the robot's first blow with an Eldritch magic shield. Then I proceeded to block Ultron's next few attacks using my Eldritch shield, before attempting to blast him with a powerful spell. This however failed as the robot leaped sharply backward, dodging the attack with outstanding ease. Seeing this, I exhaled in annoyance. Ultron however grinned, and quickly continued his assault, delivering a horizontal kick empowered by what appeared to be a pair of thrusters. With no time to react, and the kick already pushing me back, I was sent flying towards the buildings, my arm feeling numb. On the ground, debris covering my body, I cursed. Okay, I sighed, pushing the debris off my body, only to see Ultron sitting above a rock, staring at me. You know the best thing about vibranium, Ultron said, smiling, is that with enough knowledge, it's quite easy to break apart. He then pointed at my arm, and sure enough, there was a crack on my armor. I stared at my arm, seeing the damage, thinking how this could be possible. Anti-metal, a little gift from the Antarctica. Ultron chuckled, no armor can't resist the beckoning call of its vibrations, for they all eventually break apart to its beauty. I laughed. You are really pissing me off, I replied, angry that he had damaged my armor, happy he had told me how he had managed to do it. Well, Tony was involved in my creation, Ultron shot back, and in the blink of an eye, he was back on me, delivering a barrage of powerful attacks, each set even stronger than the last. Pushed into a corner, I blocked his attacks using my magic, but even then, his attacks were slowly but surely tearing up my armor. If things continued the way they were going, one thing was certain, my defeat was unavoidable. I needed to think outside the box. I was after all quickly becoming overwhelmed by Ultron's power. I needed the Avengers. With that thought in mind, I opened a portal behind me and tried to jump, but Ultron grabbed me by the leg and slammed me across the ground. I analyzed your battle pattern during your battle with the twins, Escaping it's no longer possible. He pulled an Iron Man on me. Fuck you. I cursed, blasting the ground beneath me to create a diversion before I started to retreat. You know, Ultron said, appearing in front of me as I tried to open another portal. This is getting boring. Once again, he stopped me from teleporting, by kicking me high into the air. As I fell, a single thought bounced inside my head. Escaping was no longer possible. His fucking plot armor had made it so he learned how I reacted to things, effectively neutralizing any means that could provide a tactical retreat. How about we end this? Ultron said, as I fell to his arms. No, I replied, changing my trajectory with my telekinesis. If you learn it how I fight, all I have to do is learn new things, so how about you help me? You humans never learn, Ultron sighed, shaking his head in disappointment. If the regular me was not enough to counter his advances, then I would simply do things I would normally never do, and who knows, I might learn a thing or two. First step, illusions. While it was true, I used illusions for one thing or two, I never applied them in battle, meaning it was an unknown variable to him. So, with a smile, I created an army of me's and charged at Ultron. Illusions. Ultron chuckled, what's next, a bunny under your hat? Your Tony is showing, I said, alongside illusionary clones said at the same time, earning a glare from Ultron. Illusions don't work on me. Ultron exclaimed. Sadly he was wrong, for he had jumped towards a fake me, stabbing the air. It looks like they do, I said, blasting him into the ground. How can you make a hologram with a heat signal? Ultron hissed, standing up. Who knows? One of my illusionary clones said. Maybe I'm just that good, I added with a wink. Or maybe, you just suck. One of my fakes shrugged. Perhaps you need a software update, may I recommend turning off your PC? Another added. Very funny, but ultimately pointless. Ultron smiled, you might have an army of illusions, but I have an army of me, and we are very real. True, I nodded, alongside my fakes. But, would you really call your army? I mean, so far you have fought me alone, is it perhaps that you need to prove something by killing me yourself? Nah, that's not your style, you simply can't move your army here, otherwise the Avengers would come, and that is something you don't want. I can't help but wonder why. Ultron glared at me, before he turned to a fake, blasting him away, very perceptive. Vision event started. Stop Ultron from uploading his code into Vision, help Tony buying him some time. Here goes nothing, maybe, it's about your vision. I mean, that body sure looks like an upgrade, I added, making Ultron look for the first time since our battle started, afraid. I was right to deem you a higher threat than the Avengers. Ultron chuckled a cold, angry chuckle. I'm blushing, one of my fakes replied, earning a blast from Ultron. I can't help but wonder, why are you still here? Ultron asked, turning around to face another fake. With this annoying, yet effective distraction, you could have portal away, so why did you decide to stay? Many reasons, a fake sighed. But mostly one of the fakes added. Because I'm oddly having fun. Maybe Thor has been rubbing off me, I chuckled. Then again, it's not only that but the fact you are helping me grow, and learn, so for that. I thank you, one of the fakes bowed. HMPH, Ultron sighed, very well then, time to end this. This is the third time you say that, don't you get tired of being wrong? I chuckled. You are insufferable, Ultron growled, summoning a few of his drones. I was raised in the Looney Tunes era, I take that as a compliment, one of the fakes replied. Ultron growled, and with a few of his bots, started attacking my illusions. I knew it would be a matter of time before he figured out who was the real me, so I had to experiment, trying things I had never tried before. Illusions were just the first step. Now, I had to push it a bit further. You won't be able to keep this faked for long, Ultron said, blasting a few of my illusions out of commission. Well, I don't need much time, one of my fakes replied. As I formulated a plan, almost immediately coming up with something. Transmutation. I wasn't a master of that particular magic school, but I knew how to transmute basic things into other basic things. All I had to do was turn that into a creative outcome for me. So, with that in mind, I started transmutating. Needless to say, I had to be careful. If Ultron noticed I was changing things around our battlefield, my plan would not work. And my plan required his ignorance. So, instead of transmuting the debris into bombs, or other explosive weapons like I wanted right out of the bat, I added an extra step, transmuting not only the rocks and debris into weapons, but the weapons themselves to look like rocks and debris. Of course, this took some extra time. But by how Ultron was acting, dealing with my illusions, things were going rather well. He was completely oblivious to the fact the very ground beneath him was becoming a weapon to face him. "This is getting boring," Ultron shouted. "Well, I'm having fun," one of my fakes replied, laughing at the killer robot. Everything was going according to plan. It was funny really. Ultron was making me plan and act out of my comfort zone, and it was going wonderful. I almost felt the need to thank him. If it wasn't for the fact he was an enemy, and not real, I would. 2 minutes later, and with only a few illusions left, the battlefield was complete. Everything in a 2-mile radius had been transmuted into bombs, of various sizes, and I had the trigger to set them off. Now, all I needed was to ground the flying robot for a second or two, which would be enough to ensure he took the explosion in its entirety. 10 minutes you made me waste, 10 minutes killing holograms, Ultron chuckled in anger. Your death was meant to be a quick one, but what the hell, I will make an exemption for you, and make it last. Ominous, I replied, blasting Ultron on the back with Eldritch Whip. Found you, Ultron grinned, turning around to face me. Obviously, I faked shock at his statement, but this was simply part of the plan. I wanted him to find me, the real me, so that I could trap him. Well, it was bound to happen, I sighed, getting into a defensive position. Without saying another word, Ultron rushed towards me, his thrusters at full speed, and for a moment